HipHughes history. In today's lecture, we're going to look at the essential question, why did the colonies of North America leave England? And in order to do that, I would like to set up a very simple analogy for you to understand kind of the main idea of colonialism. And that is of the 1960s superstar duo, Ike and Tina Turner.
Every now and then,
their relationship, and basically the concept is that Ike Turner took advantage of Tina Turner, of her natural talent to sing, and controlled her and was physically, mentally, and psychologically abusive towards her in order to, feel good about himself and make money and, be the man. And very much, the colonies are very much like Tina Turner. Full of natural talent, natural resources, kind of young and inexperienced, and being controlled by the king and later the parliament of Great Britain. So that's kind of the analogy that I'd like to start off with, so you understand the power relationship between the colonies that were created out of the government of Great Britain and are controlled by England and Great Britain, and how they're going to grow up in a sense. And they're going to eventually demand, like Tina Turner does one day, control over her own destiny, her own talent, and her own future. So, here we go, guys. Let's look at long-term reasons and short-term reasons. Long-term reasons first, and here we go. Wait. What's an M&M doing up on the wall? An M&M, Mr. Hughes, you've gone mad. Actually, I haven't gone mad. I might have, but not in relationship to my M&M here. The M&M stands for the M&M concept, and it is a thesis that I teach with sometimes. And remember, a thesis is something that carries on beyond the course. It's something that might be true in other areas of study or other areas of social studies. And the M&M concept is simple. If somebody has never had the ability to make decisions for themselves, if they've never had an M&M, and that feels good and tastes good. And then the powers to be give you a taste of that freedom, of that self-government, of that chocolate. You're going to want some more. I mean, the M&M concept is why the Soviet Union fell apart. Gorbachev's perestroika, introducing glasnost, some economic and personal freedoms. Man, once the people over in that Soviet Union tasted that chocolate, they didn't just want one or two more. They wanted the means of production of M&Ms. So the M&M concept in this course, as it relates to colonialism, is the idea of the House of Burgesses and the Mayflower Compact. Two vocabulary words that are probably going to pop up on that test. One or the other one will. Almost always does. So here's the House of Burgesses. The House of Burgesses was formed in 1607 in Jamestown, Virginia. And it was basically, I don't want to say a gift, but it was given to the colonists, a place for them to make decisions about their own destiny. An example of self-government, an example of an M&M. And the Virginia Company, which controlled Virginia under the guidance of the King of England, decided to do this for their own reasons. They wanted us to be hardworking, and they thought that this would, give us ownership over the land and make us want to do better. But what they had really done is they planted the seeds of change, of long-term want for that self-government, that ability to make decisions about your community and your state and your nation. I mean, once you taste that, you're going to want more. And later down the road, the House of Burgesses will be kind of stirring in the metabolism of the American colonies. The second M&M, or the second long-term cause of the American Revolution, is the Mayflower Compact. And the Mayflower Compact is a contract. It is a piece of paper that was signed, not even by a majority of the Pilgrims, but by a few hundred of the Pilgrims coming over on the Mayflower in 1620. And while it's not going to have tremendous power, it does represent the idea that they made the decision that they were going to make decisions about their decisions. And this is another M&M. And although we're not going to, be granted much more, as the colonists grow up, those two early experiences in self-government are going to kind of wafer around, and they're going to kind of be in our memory. So, there you go. Two long-term reasons, the M&M concept. Once again, we have the House of Burgesses and the Mayflower Compact. Let's look at some economic reasons. So I'll be right back. Hey guys, economic reasons. Now, I want to be careful because we could talk for an hour, for hours, about the different laws passed and the different grievances that the colonists had. But we really want to keep it kind of be a straight shooter for you folks watching this. So we'll get right to the point. Basically, there are two economic reasons for why we're going to leave England. And the first one is called triangular trade. And if you look up on the wall, you can see the triangle is the geographical triangle between kind of starting in England over here, and England and Europe colonizing Africa for the slave trade and for, evil reasons. The next line would be the Middle Passage, kind of bringing the slaves across the Atlantic Ocean, and I can't even fathom the death and the disease and the genocide that went on those boats. And then basically taking the raw materials from North America. Now, if I go back to that Tina analogy, basically using her voice, using her, I don't want to say her body, but her natural and raw materials, her natural resources. And we're not going to let Tina profit off of her voice, off of her, image. Neither is England going to allow us to profit off of our natural body, our cotton and our tobacco, our natural talent. He's rather going to force us to send those raw materials back to England in order to manufacture them, to cut a record, to make a shirt, to create jewelry, whatever it may be, because that's where the profit lies. And then, ironically enough, they'll send the raw materials as manufactured goods back to the Americas to sell them for profit, or to the rest of Europe or wherever it might be. But this is called triangular trade. Sometimes you'll see the word mercantilism. Notice the merchant kind of aspect of the root of the word, to sell, right? But this is the concept of us being used, of Tina being taken advantage of England taking advantage of our raw materials, our natural resources, exploiting it with slave labor, and then using those raw materials to make a greasy buck for some G. Bling, bling. So there is a kind of longer term economic reasons. In a shorter term, I want to get right to the ketchup and the mustard here. I would say the phrase no taxation without, you already knew the word, representation. And you've heard that word over and over again in this lecture. This idea of the colonists being able to make decisions for themselves. Now, they weren't against all taxes. I know we hear a lot of that today, down with all taxes, but governments need tax money. They need tax money in order to build bridges and solve problems, and, there might be too much spending, but there needs to be revenue. So the colonists weren't against the idea of being taxed. They were against the idea of being taxed without having a say in how they were being taxed, without representation. The decisions are being made, hundreds of miles away, 1,000 miles away across the ocean. And we have no say in that. And there was actually a reason why they raised taxes, the French and Indian War. England protected us in that French and Indian War, and they wanted some money back, so they raised taxes. And they were met with resistance, and that phrase, no taxation without representation. And everybody kind of kept upping the ante, whether it be the Stamp Act or the Tea Party. Everybody kept upping the ante, and that is definitely a reason for the revolution. So we are going to look at some philosophical reasons, and then we're gonna chop this baby up and be done soon. So here we go. Wait 1 second. The Enlightenment. Europe, 1700s, right? The opening the door to knowledge. And that philosophical experience of learning certain truths about the universe, about life, about human beings, bled over into the American Revolution. And when we look later at the Constitution, we're going to see lots of Enlightenment kind of philosophers and thinkers, Rousseau and Montesquieu and Voltaire. But as we start off, we're just going to start off with one. And if you forget this guy's name, you shouldn't go to your exam. John Locke. John Locke is an English philosopher who wrote, I believe in the 1600s. You don't have to know the book. I think it's Second Treatise on Government, but I could be wrong. But nevertheless, he developed this concept of natural rights. And the idea that we are born as human beings with natural rights. And he was really more talking about property. We won't get into this whole socialistic thing here, but basically this idea of you were born with, freedom. And that government's role was to protect that freedom. That was the only job, really, of government, was to protect natural rights. So, if the government is abusing your natural rights, the logically conclusion to that is that you should overthrow your government. A very radical concept, because you have to remember when this book was written, when he came up and he wrote this, most of the world is under controlling governments. Governments that control your natural rights, that abuse them, maybe that make you go to war, or take your speech away, or don't let you practice a religion. So this is a very radical notion that the founding fathers, the colonists, were playing with. So that's one of them, natural rights, and the other one is called consent of the governed. This idea that, think of it like a chicken and the egg. You see the chicken and the egg. Do you know which one came first? Was it the chicken or was it the egg? I have no idea, because I'm not a bird biologist. But in my analogy, I always think of the bird being the people, the chicken being the people, and that the people lay the egg, and the egg is the government, right? Consent of the governed, consent of the chicken. Now, I don't want to get really kind of icky with you here, but I don't think that a chicken can come up with a fertilized egg without a partner. That would be the rooster. So the chicken has to get down with the rooster. She has to give her consent to the rooster in order to create that government. And that concept today of consent of the governed would kind of like be a voting booth, right? Bark, 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 open up the voting booth and be like, hey, rooster, I think I like you. Consent of the governed. Now, back then, we did not bore the egg. The egg bore us. The egg birthed us, the people. It's backwards. And as we get into the Declaration of Independence in a moment, we're going to see these major concepts of natural rights and consent of the chickens, consent of the governed, embedded in that document. So let's get to it. We have one more section. We're basically going to wake the people up and get the heck out of Dodge. The Declaration of Independence. The Dear John letter. Basically, the Declaration of Independence is just that. It is a letter. It is a dump your you-know-what letter to the king. Now, before we get to the Declaration, let's just kind of go over Thomas Paine really quick. Thomas Paine wrote a very influential book. I call it in my classroom the Book of Duh. Sometimes I'll refer to it as the Book of Oprah. Because whenever I watch Oprah, somebody is kind of like learning a life lesson and a little light bulb goes off and, oh my God, I should do that. So, when the colonists, who are really not for revolution, like they're upset about consent of the governed or maybe taxes and they don't like the king. But the idea of revolution, of overthrowing the government by violent means, by picking up a gun and risking your life is a pretty big leap. So Thomas Paine wrote a book called Common Sense. And basically the answer on the test is common sense basically changed the minds and the hearts of many colonists to support the revolution. I always say in class, like, duh, no taxation without representation. Duh, triangular trade. Come on now. How old are you, Tina? You need to get the heck away from Mike. Duh, wake up, girl. You get the idea? That's common sense. So as, more Americans are supporting this idea, and not a majority of them, but maybe a third of them, and third neutral, a third for England, we write the Declaration of Independence. And this is a big concept. The Declaration of Independence is a letter written by the colonists, signed by Thomas Jefferson, written by Thomas Jefferson, addressed to the King of England, saying basically, I don't love you anymore, and I want out. It is a divorce letter in a sense. Dear King, you have violated my natural rights and you suck. It is time for me to be on my way. Goodbye. Now, there's a lot more to the Declaration. There's grievances, but it talks about, no taxation without representation. And it talks about specific things the king was doing, whether it was taking colonists and trying them in England for crimes, not giving us a jury of our peers, or shutting down different printing presses because they were, promoting ideas that were threatening to the king. But that is the Declaration of Independence. And now all we have to do is fight our way to freedom. And that would be the Revolutionary War. And we'll probably kind of dive into that into the next lecture a little bit. We're not going to really go into the Revolutionary War, but we're quickly going to get into the Articles of Confederation, which is next. So I think that's all, folks. Hopefully we'll see you again real soon in another lecture. Until then, see you.